Hello and welcome to the National Archives Foundation's virtual program series. I'm Patrick Madden, the Executive Director of the Foundation. We're the nonprofit partner to the National Archives. Through this foundation programming, we're pleased to open the virtual doors of the archives and share the holdings of more than 15 billion records, objects, films, letters, drawings, photographs, and most importantly, the stories of our nation's past. Thank you for joining us from home today for another history-inspired conversation. Our fall virtual programs are kicking into gear. The museum here in Washington is open, so please visit archivesfoundation.org to stay up to date or follow us on social. In fact, right now, you can click that little subscribe button on the YouTube and help us grow our network. Our guest speaker today will take your questions later in the program, so use the YouTube chat box. And as always, to practice, and I see we've got a lot of folks practicing right now, drop in your hometown and state, and I'll give you a shout out later on in the program. Now to our featured speaker, let's jump right into it. Meredith Evans was appointed director of the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library and Museum, administered by the National Archives in November of 2015. She's the first African-American woman to direct a presidential library. As director, she focuses on civic engagement, the role of the presidency and public policy, and making accessible the records of President Carter, his cabinet, and the White House administration. She's written on the role and value of museums, libraries, and archives, and Meredith has earned degrees from Clark Atlanta University, North Carolina State University, and UNC Chapel Hill. Meredith, are you there?
I am here. Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Excellent. Good. I can see you. I can hear you. How are you and the staff doing?
Fantastic. I have to say, everybody is happy. We talk every Monday, the whole staff, and everybody's doing very well. So
excellent. Well, I know we're all eager to get back to regular times, whenever that might be. We're inching our way there. But I know you've got a great program for us. It's a bit of a birthday party we're having. I don't want to spoil anything, but I know you've got a lot to tell us about President Carter, the museum, and everything you're doing down in Atlanta. So I am going to pass the screen to you and let you take it over. It's all yours.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Well, this is an honor and fantastic to be here. I'm really excited this evening to share my thoughts and some images of the Carter Presidential Library Museum in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been a lot of firsts in my time, but this one is one of the highest honors I've ever had. Next slide. When I met the Carters for the first time, for what I thought was an interview, before I could even sit down, President Carter said, "Congratulations." He asked me one question, and he asked me if I had ever been a federal employee. And then he asked the Archivist of the United States, who was with me at the time, if this is who he wanted for the job. I knew then that there was no turning back, and to serve a living president and the American public as the first African-American woman to run a presidential library it's really pretty amazing. Next slide. When I reflect on taking this job, I can't help but think it was meant to be. I actually wrote President Carter a letter inviting myself to the White House for my birthday party in 1977. I sent $1 that I borrowed from my sister and a penny, because I had that. And to help defer the cost is what I was thinking. He returned the money and he sent a note letting me know I could not have my birthday party at the White House, but he also sent me a brochure. I still have the dollar, I still have the note, and my mom has the brochure. I guess I was an archivist even before I knew what that meant. I feel like that I've come full circle. And as a trained archivist, it was really exciting to see my letter in the collection. And I'll show you where that was a little later. But it also, now that I'm older, reminds me to tell everybody, if you write a president or a government official, it is public record. And I think anybody can get a public access to your note or letter or card. So beware. Next slide. So President Carter turned 97 on October 1st. So I thought it appropriate to do a birthday theme, as Patrick kind of gave away. He was born during the Depression. And he was actually born in a hospital because his mother was a registered nurse. That building still exists today in Plains, Georgia. It's a nursing home named after his mother, Miss Lillian. When I think about President Carter and his birthday, I wonder how he celebrated, what it was like, and why I couldn't have my party at the White House. But it's not really about me. So next slide. So this is the daily diary. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the records that are in the collection. That's the next few slides. President Carter's daily diary, which every president has. They have a diary that continues to check all their meetings and all their telephone calls, whether they had them or not. It's a running list. I guess today it's probably digital, probably in somebody's phone. But back then it was all typed up or handwritten. President Carter is exactly how he is in person as you see him in the news. He's a family man. He has strong faith and values. And that's reflected in the official federal records and consistent in his leadership. This is the schedule of his first birthday in office. It's only one page, not much going on that early. But like my birthday, it was with family. And in the evening, you can see the last 5 bullets of this slide were all phone calls from his sons. And the first phone call came from his grandson, Jason Carter. And Jason, like both of his grandfathers, and his father, ran for office. He served as a Georgia state senator, and he also ran for governor in 2014. President Carter's birthday fell on a Saturday, but he still had cake and he still had ice cream and all of those fun things. But before we go on with the daily schedule, I think we need to go back to Plains real quick. Next slide. So everybody remembers Amy because she's the youngest and grew up in the White House. But people don't realize President Carter actually had 4 children. He and Mrs. Carter had 4. So I thought it'd be worth it to show this photograph to you all. If you look at the back row, you will see all of the boys. Jack holding his son Jason. Yes, the Jason I mentioned earlier. And then there's Jeff, President Carter, and then to the far right is the second oldest Chip. In the front are all the wives, Mrs. Carter and Amy. It's important to know that there are sons because all of the sons campaigned for their father around the country with their families. And so it wasn't just Amy after all. Next slide. So let's go back to the daily diary. 1 year later in 1978, October 1st, the daily diary was 6 pages, not 1, 6. He had quite a busy day. But he still managed to go to Sunday school and still managed to spend some time with family. Next slide. What I love about this, I had to highlight it. I couldn't resist. I should have invited myself to the White House for my birthday this time in 78 because he took Amy, the whole family went to the Kennedy Space Center, and then they went to the Cinderella Castle at Disney World. So I really should have tried to get on that trip. I don't know what I was thinking. Guess I was too young to notice. Next slide. So before the pandemic, we used to celebrate President Carter's birthday at the library with an admissions to match the year. So it would have been 97 cents for every visitor. We always have some type of music or choir or band playing things that he likes, a huge birthday cake, and always an oversized card for visitors to sign. In lieu of the card this year, we decided to do something online. And so you're watching that right now. Camille, next slide. 97 years in 97 seconds. So all of those photographs you saw in there in the archive as well. You probably caught Ruth Bader Ginsburg in there. If he hadn't appointed her to district court, she might not have been Supreme Court judge. So thank you for that. This image is an image of our campus. After President Carter left office, he went back to Plains, Georgia, but decided to build the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta. Rightfully so, because Plains is actually 2.5 hours from the airport. So quite a drive for a researcher to go. The Presidential Center is named that because it's a linguistic umbrella for all three entities: the library, the museum, and the Carter Center. The Carter Center is an NGO, and the library and museum are federal. So if you look on the first left, I guess you're right, that left side building is the federal building. It is actually a federal piece of property along with federal staff. We do have a branding issue. We're still considered the Carter Center, so we throw in presidential so that people know there's 3 of us on that campus. It's also important to know that President Carter's birthday is significant for him as the longest living president, but also, and his family, but also for the library and museum. It is the anniversary of the museum and library. Next slide. So in celebration of President Carter's birthday, the library and museum opened October 1st, 1986. With the 2 separate entrances, the museum entrance and the research room entrance, the library entrance. Traditionally, a past president attends the opening. So what you see there is President Reagan and wife Nancy. They were in attendance, and President Reagan also gave remarks at that, at the opening. Next slide. The Reagans also stood, obviously, by Sarah Carter, who cut the ribbon. When standing with her is her brother, who? Jason. So he's there too. And so I just love that picture. It's just a family affair. It's consistent. Next slide. Since we opened in 1986, I just want to show you some of the past exhibition. We renovated in 2009. And in 86, the museum community was different. We weren't doing digital things at that time. We weren't doing a lot of video and audio. Everything was very traditional and tactile. So what you see here is a wall of presidents is what it was called at the time. That's soon to be replaced by something else, you'll see. Next slide. This is the early life, which most of the libraries begin with the context of when the president was born and some of the early artifacts of their life. If you look in that picture, you'll see Mrs. and President and Mrs. Carter together. That is actually their wedding photo. And in current day, we actually have a replica of her wedding dress next to that same photo. Next slide. Confronting nuclear threats was the exhibit that spent a lot of time talking about the Cold War and the formation of the Department of Energy. President Carter created the Department of Energy out of multiple units in the federal government. It was divided into 2 sections: non-nuclear federal energy and policy and programs. And the second entity was exploration of the field of nuclear energy. Next slide. This actually is Camp David, and you will see as we move, when we show you the newer pictures of the newer exhibit, Camp David was one of the most amazing events of President Carter's career, the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Next slide. So in 2009, the museum closed for 6 months and did a $10 million renovation and expanded. What you're looking at now, those glass walls and those boxes, that actually was a solid wall before it was, but now you get to see the actual records. So if you look at the bottom shelf on the far right, my letter was in one of those boxes inviting myself to the White House. But it also, if you look underneath the glass, there's a line of sort of furniture boxes. Those are actually representations of each of the presidential libraries. So instead of the presidential wall, when they renovated, they did one of each of the presidential libraries. And then each monitor talks about what archives are, what the presidential libraries do, and the significance of their relationship with the National Archives. The other part of this is to show what it means. It talks about museum objects as well. We preserve all the gifts received by the president and First Lady, whether it's from North America or from abroad. And these gifts, especially ones from foreign governments, aren't the property of the president. If they really miss it and want it after they leave office, they can buy it back at market value. So this image is the start of the new exhibition. This is just one section of the gallery that is about the beginnings of his early life. We have a copy of his report card, his high chair, lots of things, neighbors and people that were influential in his life, all the way from his childhood until he became governor. That's this section. Next slide. So when they reimagined this gallery, they actually did an extensive part on his campaign. And that's why I showed you the picture of the family. All of the children campaigned were on the campaign trail, and also the Peanut Brigade. The Peanut Brigade were Georgians that had campaigned with President Carter when he was a senator for Georgia. And so those people just continuously came around, traveled the country, and campaigned for him. With that said, Mrs. Carter also campaigned. And she is definitely one of my favorite first ladies. She's in my top 5. She really has done phenomenal work. And she tells this story about how she was on the campaign trail and she was in a rural area on the radio station. And the interviewer kept asking her things like, what was President Carter's favorite meal? What does she like to cook? What does he eat for breakfast? And she finally stopped him and said, I'm not here to talk about cooking. I'm here to talk about my husband becoming president of the United States and the issues. And I thought, yeah, she was amazing right out of the box. Next slide. So instead of focusing on the events of the Cold War in this section and the nuclear threats, we talk about President Carter's naval career. While he was never able to actually sail in a nuclear submarine, because that was a year later when that was finished being built, he did attend nuclear power school for a little while, and he has extensive knowledge of some aspects of engineering and nuclear power and energy. So this is that section. You get to kind of feel like you're in a submarine itself. He ended up leaving the Navy when his father passed so that he could go home and take care of the farm. Next slide. Next slide. So remember the earlier picture of Camp David and the other elder exhibition. This is Camp, can you go back one? So we give you a sense of feeling like you're actually in the cabin, in one of the cabins at Camp David. This is one of the signature achievements of the Carter administration. It led to his post-presidency career. He continues to do diplomacy across the globe. And it also won him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. They actually stated when he was given the award, they gave it to him for his decades of untiring effort for finding peace solutions to international conflicts, to advance democracy and human rights, and to promote economic and social development. And he still does that today. So the new exhibition really does chronicle his life, but also his post-presidency. Next slide. Next slide. So I can't, again, I gotta talk about Mrs. Carter. I gotta talk about her. One of the major changes in this exhibition is that it highlights Mrs. Carter much more than it did in the past. Her role in President Carter's career is influential. She always says things like she doesn't want people to think she told Jimmy what to do, but she did stand firm by him and had her own things that she wanted to get accomplished, the Equal Rights Amendment, but most importantly, removing the stigma of mental health. Mrs. Carter, when they returned back to Plains, she helped with the family business. She campaigned. When she was in the governor's mansion in the White House, she began to fight for the Equal Rights Amendment. She has her own political role in some sense along the way. So in particular, I really want to highlight the mental health. So we're going to show a video in the next slide. Next slide.
There are not many former First Ladies of America. And when one of them puts her shoulder to the wheel and says, I'm going to work on this, and keeps at it for 30 plus years, there is an effect. To say it's important is an understatement.
One is to speak out and get people talking about mental illness so that everybody in our country can realize that it's just an illness like any other illness.
We know that mental illness is a disease as any other. It can be diagnosed, it can be treated, and almost everyone suffering from mental illness can be helped.
One of my best programs are mental health fellowships for journalists, because we were brainstorming one day, what else can we do to overcome stigma? And somebody said, why don't we educate journalists so they'll know the issues, know what we know about mental health issues, and then can report it accurately. And it's been really successful. When I became involved in Georgia, nobody would talk about mental illness. Nobody wanted to be involved with the issue. Less than a month after Jimmy was in office, he passed a resolution calling for a President's Commission on Mental Health. We worked for 4 years, made a list of recommendations, and actually got them into a bill and got the bill passed.
So I will end looking at the exhibition in this way. There's quite a bit of the museum is the post-presidency. This is a map table. It's very interactive. Kids love it, adults love it. You can actually go to different countries where the Carter Center has done diplomatic work, and especially for the health programs, eradicating guinea worm, trachoma, river blindness, as well as some peacekeeping missions. You'll be able to do that all on that map table right there. Next slide. So of course, the majority of our visitors only know us as a museum, which is why I spent time earlier showing you the records. The heart of the institution are the collections and are the research room. Aside from President Carter in the research room, we've had journalists like Kai Bird and Jonathan Alters, whose books have just come out. We've had former administrators like Stu Eisenstadt and Gerald Rafshoon as well. And we're open to the public, so we don't deny anybody. Students have come by, from college students and K through 12, and the general public. We try to make sure we have something for anybody to see, even if they don't have an immediate appointment. Carter has obviously used the collections. He's sitting in the reading room now, in that very room. He does all his research and preparation. He's written over 30 books, and he's got a ton of op-eds that he probably still has waiting to kind of send to the New York Times or Wall Street Journal when he's ready. He's an avid reader and he's an avid writer. I'm sure he's got more books up his sleeve. The collection also includes official records of the Carter administration, personal papers and family records. And we've created a collection specific to Mrs. Carter, who's an author in her own right. She has 5 books herself. So she has a collection that's separate from his as well. So with that said, the daily diaries have been extremely interesting, and Mrs. Carter has her diaries and notes as well, and we can't wait to have that collection open and available to the public. So with that, I'd like to end with a comprehensive tour that I'd like to share with you this evening. It's kind of done with sort of a drone video. It could make you a little sick, but it gives you a better sense of where we are in Atlanta. We have a beautiful skyline. And so I hope you all, when the pandemic is over, find your way down to hot Atlanta and come by the Carter Presidential Library and Museum. Next slide. I guess we won't end with the video.
Well, we might be able to come back to that. I think we're having some Wi-Fi delay. Oh, here we go.
So I will say, definitely come visit. We're probably the cheapest thing in town and the most fun. We have beautiful grounds with gardens and flowers in the back as well. So I hope you come by. Patrick, I'm ready. Question away.
Excellent, excellent. I highly advise to come visit. It's a terrific museum and experience. I can't remember when we did. It might have been right after you showed up, 2015, 2016. We did
2016.
Terrific set of
Mending
programs.
America.
Rights and Justice with President Carter was amazing. So let's jump in. I'm going to take a couple of the obvious questions off the table for our audience. Hopefully there'll be softballs for you, and then we'll jump in. We've got some terrific questions coming in. We got a great group of people here. And just to give you a flavor, Scranton, Pennsylvania, Madison, Wisconsin, a whole bunch of Washington, D.C. area and outlying areas, Beaufort, South Carolina, New Orleans, Phillipsburg, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Houston, Frisco, Texas, Austin, Simi Valley. I guess you're friends of the Reagan Library, learning a little bit about the Carters. Nevada, California, Bellevue, Washington, Buffalo and Poughkeepsie, New York, and of course, Atlanta and Plains, Georgia. So welcome to everybody who's joined us today. So first thing, we always get the question, so I'm going to ask it. What if someone wants to jump into his life biography? Do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, I think Jonathan Alder's book right now is probably my favorite read. It's Kai Bird's is good as well. It's a little more biased. I think Alder really talks about the beginning to the end in a very easy read. If you want to get facts and figures, do Eisenstadt's is good as well, but it's super detailed and it's really thick. It'll remind you of being back in a college history class. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, we need both for our viewers. We definitely have the history nerds who would join us, and we love folks who want to get the introduction. So thank you. Those are terrific. So what about the family? You mentioned along the way, you said the family, obviously the president's involved with the center and the presidential. Is the family also involved with the work that you do there?
Definitely. Jason Carter's chair of the Carter Center board. So we bump into him quite often, and the family's very, every day. They don't have any pomp, no, they're not pompous at all. They're very laid back. We actually have kids about the same age. Amy, Jason, and I all live probably within 15, 20 minutes from each other. So we can bump into the grocery store and, that's like, hey, how are you? And Chip is in Plains, and he's actually rebuilding roofs for people's houses and helping everybody update their electricity. I mean, they just really are a family-based group of people who take care of the community, and they will continue to do that for a really, really long time.
Great. Well, so you actually brought up a good question, a good point, that the question that came from the audience about the records. So I do have a follow-up on research, but one of the questions was, we know the presidential records are there from the administration, but what about pre-presidency and post-presidency? Are those all kept there, or are they elsewhere?
No, actually they're not. So the governor's records are at the Georgia State Archive, which actually shares property or is right next to another national archive. So we all are within the city. The Carter Center maintains their own records, but we do have some copies of things. Like we have some of the final reports of the Carter Center. And we do have some of his personal papers, not his manuscripts, but we do have like the family photos. We have some personal manuscripts in terms of like essays and things that he's written or letters. And we have Mrs. Carter's stuff from her administration, but also some personal things. So we have a nice, interesting combination of collection materials. They're just not all processed and accessible to the public just yet. But there will be. We're coming. We're getting there.
So that's a great lead in to my question. So obviously he's very prolific with the writing, but obviously folks are still coming to do research. Don't we know everything about Jimmy Carter and the administration? I mean, what are folks, I know obviously it's been closed because of COVID, but what are folks coming and doing research on these days in the research rooms?
Right. Well, pre-pandemic, we had a ton of filmmakers in the library. I mean, Atlanta has become a film town. We actually ended up doing an exhibit on President Carter as governor, creating the film commission in Atlanta, in Georgia, and how that work that he did has led us to having, every major filmmaker here in the city, Marvel and Nickelodeon and Fox and all of these people, all these movies are being filmed. But then people were coming in and literally doing documentaries on him. There's the Rock and Roll President that's just came out about 9 months ago. Miss Lillian, a film on his mother. There's one on the Iran hostage conflict. So a lot of documentaries. And so we have a lot of footage. We have a lot of film. We have raw footage from different networks. And then we have existing footage from White House photographers and film people. So that was the big thing. And then whatever becomes popular, whatever's in the news, that's like when Argentina was heavily in the news or China's heavily in the news, everybody always comes and looks at Carter papers. That's all there. It's interesting because we put solar panels on the roof of the library.
I noticed that.
Everybody remembers Reagan taking the solar panels down, and we actually have an original solar panel in the exhibit, but we actually put solar panels on the museum as well. He couldn't be more pleased. President Carter put solar panels out in Plains, and that actually helps with the irrigation. So, there's things that we do that he's always around and available to talk about. And I will finally say that he's in the curriculum. He's in the Georgia standards. So if you're in 2nd and 4th grade, you're definitely going to see some Carter stuff and you're going to come visit. And that's amazing.
That's terrific. I was actually just chatting with a colleague today. I was wondering, like, I wonder if they have any of the original solar panels there.
We
There
do.
you
We have
go.
one.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Mrs. Carter, I know you're a fan. Talked a lot about her work in mental health and talking about being ahead of the times. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about that over the last, year and a half with everything now, students, children, adults stuck at home, trying to figure out how to get through all this craziness with the pandemic. She was frankly really ahead of her time. Did she have an inspiration? Like, did she look to Eleanor Roosevelt? Are there others that she might have been inspired by that, or did she just take this on her own?
I think she took it on her own. And I think that, President Carter's mother had a lot of influence on her. Miss Lillian was, she was a Democrat. She was a supporter of LBJ. And, before his father passed, his father was a segregationist for a while, and he ended up sharecropping and doing some things before he died. And so it was a really interesting balance that you can see President Carter has learned from the value of hard work, but the value of also finding your own way and being outspoken. And Miss Lillian, his mother, was quite outspoken. And I think Mrs. Carter knows to have a voice. I think she has a very supportive relationship. If you ask them how they can stay married for 70 years, she's going to say things like, we do things that we like to do together, and then we know what to do when we are apart. So they she's just that lady. She likes to go fishing, and she always knew that women were equal, right? And that she's from that Depression generation. That's how they were raised, to sort of be a step behind the man. And she's never had to be in that role with her husband. President Carter to this day calls her boss lady, and I think she's never been smothered, I guess. She has a degree. She's fun. She's fun and quite intelligent. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we have a couple questions that get more into, I won't say policy, but more about his time in the White House. He considered himself an outsider from Washington, as other presidential candidates and successors to have as well. Some consider that a problem for his agenda. Would he agree to that, or did he find value in that sort of outsider perspective on his time in office?
I think he finds value in the outsider, that outsider viewpoint. I think if you look at his first year, I think he himself realized that he couldn't do it all by himself. He didn't have a chief of staff until very late into the first year he was in office. And I think that's when he realized as much as he likes to read and as much as he wanted to know everything about everything, he needed somebody to help with that as well. And that's what a chief of staff does. President Carter to this day still reads everything. When he used to come to the office every year, they would pick which program or which group would present. And he would have read your report 3 times over and probably would have asked you questions. It was very nerve-wracking at the time. So he's an avid reader, and having a chief of staff really helped him. So I think when he came into office, I'm not even sure he considered himself an outsider. I feel like he felt like he had done Georgia politics, he knew enough, but that he was ready to make changes and support the American public in any way he could. And I think the things that people criticize Carter about are things that really speak to how he was raised in his value system. It's not that he wanted long lines at the gas station, but he did want people to be frugal and balance their life a little better so that until we got the energy situation resolved, right? But he's also a child of the Depression, and I think that if people who lived through that, or we're going through the pandemic now, people who lived through the flu epidemic and things like that, you will see your behavior shift. And he governed the way he was raised. I don't think he would consider himself an outsider per se.
Mm-hmm. So those life experiences show their ways in lots of stripes, when you're in positions like that. Yeah. So we have someone who's watching, who was in Egypt in 1979. And there was a lot of appreciation by Egyptians for what he did. Did he ever visit shortly thereafter to feel that appreciation?
I actually have to think about that. I believe, I do know he's returned. I just don't know what year, if they did it during his presidency or not. I have to really think about that. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I mean, I know he's returned to Egypt. I know but I don't know how long after the peace treaty. That's a good question. That's something to look up. I'm going to write that one down. No one's ever asked me that one before.
That's it. See, we always get one curveball, which is good. That's why we have our audience with us. Can you talk a little bit more? You touched on his military service. So where did he serve? Any more detail you might share?
It was actually a short stint. He was in Annapolis, and then he did a couple of tours. They did go to Germany. There were a couple of places abroad, but then he really wanted to serve on a submarine, so he did that. It's actually interesting because Mrs. Carter really enjoyed being in the military and seeing the different places. And when his father passed and they returned to planes, she wasn't very happy about that. She really wanted to stay traveling. And to this day, before the pandemic, they used to travel a lot. They go to Argentina and go to different countries to see the world. I think that desire to see the world really, really made him go into the Navy. And I think while rightfully so, he left to take care of family. I think if he had stayed, he probably would have been one of the first people on that nuclear submarine and really been doing some amazing things.
Okay. I have another specific question. Does the center or I guess the museum have information on the Alaska land work that he did as the president?
Yes. And see, the branding issue. Yes, we actually have the papers about Alaska. We have anything that was related, some of the discussion between him and his staff, because everything in that day and age was in memos. We didn't have email then. And people took minutes. So we have a lot of information on that, how the decision came about, and when it was made, and all of that is in there. And we even have some images and topography maps of the area. So that's a really challenging situation too, because he really believed he was doing the right thing. And there's, a large group of indigenous people that feel differently. So that's a challenging thing, but, again, he did, it's better than having oil everywhere, I think, but that's me.
So I have a fact check question. I've not heard this quote, so if this is way off, but a question that this viewer heard earlier in life, that Jimmy Carter once told the KKK he'd flush $1 down the toilet rather than give it to them.
That is true. I can't remember the exact setting, but that is a true statement. When he, it's interesting that he won the governorship in Georgia at the time, because he actually lost the first time he ran. He ran against a segregationist, and he ran a pretty neutral platform, but he didn't win that first time. And then second time he did win, and he really spoke out in his governor speech about coming together and removing segregation. Georgia was really late in the game, desegregating schools and desegregating things. It was really in the early 70s when all of it happened, before he really got into office. So he did make that statement. I can't remember the full context of it, but that it was something along those lines. But he's still living, and I can't be mad that mad at him with that statement either.
So let's turn to the museum a little bit. I've got some good questions for you. First is, are there any good children's books about the Carters or the presidency, his presidency?
There aren't, actually. There is, so Amy Carter wrote a book, but it's not about the presidency itself. She wrote a children's book. There is one, and I'm trying to remember the author. It's a picture book that's actually pretty good. And then there's a junior novel And recently there's a comic book just came out, and I can't figure out where to buy it, but literally a comic book came out on his birthday about his life and his time in the administration. So there really aren't many. A lot of the books focus on, farming or peanuts, not about the administration. I think there's about 2 that focus on that, and they're both picture books.
Okay, an opportunity for the budding authors and
Yeah.
those who want to come and do research at the library.
Because one of them I think is out of print, actually. So yeah, that's a good idea. If there are any children's authors out there, this is the time.
Does the museum have any resources on a virtual basis? Obviously, right now, and they do in person for elementary students who might be able to access programs now.
Yes, we have lesson plans online, and then we should, on our YouTube channel, if they're not up already, we have a couple of lessons that our education specialist has done that should be online. There's also some in the NARA education unit. So if you go to the National Archives page where the education resources there are 2 or 3 units on President Carter as well. And then you can always email us directly. It's education@carterlibrary.gov. Then the education specialist will send you resources that he's developed along the way. In fact, there's a presentation next week, I believe, about Amy Carter being in the White House. So he's in the curriculum, so we've quite a bit. I will also say Google Culture. There should be 2 things on Google Culture, one specific to, I think it's 4th grade curriculum, and one for 8th grade that's online. And I'll find those links and I can send them to you, Patrick, so you can post them.
Excellent. And your team is quick to the YouTube chat. They said they also have lessons on your YouTube channel. So
that's what I said. I knew we had some stuff on the YouTube.
Always surf around the YouTube.
Always
I know we're getting a little bit close to the end. I wanted to hit a couple other questions here. Going back to the First Lady, and I had this in my head and I forgot to ask. So Rosalind Carter obviously could be very committed to mental health. How did she end up on that topic? Was there a family background, or do we know why she championed that?
There was some family that suffered from different kinds of illnesses, mental illness, and it really bothered her. And she was, she being in the governor's mansion, she saw in the city and in the area that this was a need. So that became really close to her heart. But yes, there was 2 family members, in fact, that suffered from some mental illness, and she wanted to remove the stigma, particularly in the rural areas where people, were name calling and just being, mean, like they do today, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And she's made real strides in that, not just by going to the Georgia State Senate, but also in current day, she's got a journalism program around the world where people are learning about mental health through the media, which is really rare. So it's been really great.
That's fantastic. So just the museum, just trying to sneak in a couple more questions here. And our viewer might have missed this if you mentioned it. Is there an exhibit in the museum on the Iran hostage situation?
Yes, right before the post-presidency, we have a wall with the Iran hostage information on it. It's really interesting because we have a lot of footage and photographs of President Carter at the desk, really trying to show the American people how hard he was working to release the hostages. And in actuality, we can battle over who really did it, but at the end of the day, he did it. But it was at that point, it was too late. He should have, people say he should have been campaigning instead of sort of trying to do that. He could have done both at the same time, but that's not what he chose to do. He lives off of his value system, and he wanted people to know that he was working hard to successfully free those people, rather than campaign, kiss babies and wave. That was not what he felt was important. But again, that could be also why he lost the election. That's one of the main theories behind his loss, is that he hadn't freed the hostages, but also he hadn't campaigned either. So it's a tough time, but there is a section on it in the library, and I think it's equitable. It doesn't say he did it without help. It doesn't say that he was a complete failure with it either. So there's some balance there.
Okay. And fingers crossed, we're moving into a place where all the presidential libraries will start to reopen, and communities are healthier and living with the new world that we're living in with COVID. What's coming up besides a birthday party that we just had? What can folks who want to come and visit you in Atlanta, what are they going to see? If some any big programs, symposia, special exhibits that might be coming up, later this year or next year, as people plan?
Well, you're asking me to plan post-pandemic. No, it's really interesting. So there's a peanut festival in Plains, Georgia every year, and a butterfly trail also in the summer. So we try to do things in conjunction with Plains, Georgia, because that's where he's now residing and spending most of his time. So you will see two kind of events, not just speaking events, but you'll see us do some kind of festival. We do host a farmer's market and things like that. And our grounds are beautiful, so people picnic all the time. But we are hosting the Green Book from the Smithsonian. We're going to host that exhibit when the pandemic is over, and talk about traveling through Georgia and segregated Georgia of African Americans. And then we'll continue to do programming. We do school tours all day, so there's always something for the kids to do at the library and the museum. So, come see us. You haven't seen
Excellent.
it before. You got to come.
That's it, exactly. And I am going to sneak one more viewer question. Is there any plans to turn their home into a museum down the road? Not right now, obviously occupied.
Actually, well, yeah. Actually, they gifted, a few years ago, they gifted their home to the national parks. So it's actually a national parks. It'll be a part of the national parks campus, really, because there's the boyhood home, there's the farm, his birth home, and the old high school, the Plains High School, has become sort of a museum that the national parks run. So now they'll include their house, and they'll be buried there as well. So you'll be driving the Plains. After you come to the museum, you'll be driving the Plains to really get a sense of how he lived and what his life was like in Plains. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I recently visited the LBJ Ranch and got a feel for that. I've been to the LBJ Library in the past, but and so I got a feel for that. And that too is, there's a different perspective there when you go there. So I'm sure folks will make their way to Plains so they can get the full Carter experience.
Yeah, and it'll be like going back into time. I mean, the house has not been renovated. It's the same house it was, same furniture, and it's there. So that's not changing. He likes what he likes.
I'm sure. It's very comfortable, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have come to the end of our time. This has been a terrific conversation. You are getting lots of kudos in the YouTube chat, which you can read from your admirers afterwards. And we really appreciate your time. There's also a lot of love, a lot of birthday wishes for President Carter, as you can imagine. And we've had a terrific audience. So I want to thank you, Meredith, for putting together the presentation, giving people the overview. We obviously want to encourage folks to come visit. And don't wait for 90-cent day for membership. Get down to Atlanta and check out the Carter Presidential Library and learn even more. And Meredith, have good luck with the reopening as we get to that point.
And we're hoping to October 18th to be open to the public again. It'll be time tickets, but we'll be open and ready to go. I can't wait.
Excellent. There you go. That's how we close our programs. Come get your ticket now. Terrific. Well, Meredith, enjoy the rest of your evening. I've got a couple of closing comments for and announcements for our audience members. I want to thank Meredith again for joining us as the head of the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library Museum. She's just a terrific spirit in the Presidential Library Network. So I love working with her. We'll find some more programs to do with her.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Have a good night.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I want to thank all of our corporate sponsors, of course, our members, our donors. If you'd like to become a member of the foundation, you can join today by visiting our website, archivesfoundation.org. Also want to thank our staff who make these programs possible, program logistics, prep, and promotion, Keneal McDonald, Liana Ascalise, Ricardo Lee, and the ultimate behind-the-scenes magic maker, Jim Dumas. And remember, our museum is open here in Washington, D.C. It is time ticket entry. from 10 to 5:30. Visit recreation.gov to get your tickets. And we too are, fingers crossed, as things get a little bit better. We're hoping that the capacity will continue to grow at the museum, so anybody can get your tickets, and eventually we'll get to a place where you can just walk back up again. We've got some special programs coming up. One we want to flag for you is November 3rd at 6 p.m. A Koki, A Life Well Lived. This is with Steve Roberts and Rebecca Roberts. This is a book that is coming out, actually, I think on the 2nd or the 3rd of November. We're going to have Steve Roberts, her husband, with us, and her daughter, Rebecca Roberts, having a conversation about a new book that's out about her life, very close to us, because Koki was a board member of the National Archives Foundation for quite a long time. And it is not too early to talk holiday shopping. Of course, we have some books by President Carter, and what I'm going to say, we've got the best museum shop in DC and online. So come visit, look at the books we've got, but also look at the terrific presidential collection that we have, and so much more. Obviously, the archives has so many topics and subjects that are covered in the holdings, and we've got those covered in the shop. So visit nationalarchivestore.org. Remember, if you want to stay up with us, follow us on social media, sign up for our emails. The National Archives is our nation's memory. What is past is prologue. Until next time, on behalf of the National Archives Foundation, thank you for joining us today.